Marko, welcome to the Fiduciary You podcast. Thank you so much for being a guest today.
Well, good morning, Josh. Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
I agree. I'm looking forward to it. We have a whole lot of different things to talk about and a lot of different topics. You and I have been friends for a really long time. We met originally being part of a study group with Dimensional Fund Advisors years ago, and always felt like we were like kindred spirits in terms of idea generation and whatnot. And I've just been really impressed by all the stuff that you and you've been doing with your firm, with GoalPath. And I can't wait to kind of unpack some of that and just talk about trends and what's happening in the industry.
You know, Josh, I got to be honest. I've been jealous of you for a long time. You know, we're on this little study group together, and there's Josh over there talking about everything he's doing in the industry. And I'm like, man, wish I could be that guy. That guy's got it figured out. He's got it going on. So likewise, my friend, this is going to be a fun time to share, and I've been an admirer and fan of yours for a long time.
Well, thank you. Smoke and mirrors, man. You know, I got nothing up my sleeves, but you know, you have a really interesting story. I think you built a really successful RIA called Two West Advisors years ago. I think probably going back 15, close to 15, so 12 years. And then, you know, what grew out of that was GoalPath Solutions, and you've done some incredibly innovative stuff from that perspective. So let's maybe start and talk a little bit about Two West and kind of how you got into the RIA and the 401k space, and where did things start for you?
Oh gosh, well, this might take the whole hour, but I'll try to pack it up. You know,
I'll crack the whip and get you moving along.
All right, dude. But you know. So I go back and I was an entrepreneur for years. From coming out of school, I was fortunate enough to get into a startup company. Fourth person hired, 100 people later. 23 U.S. offices. So it was a sports marketing company. Had nothing to do with financial services. And then had some other opportunities with some other startup companies and ran a family business for a couple of years. Unfortunately, had to sell the family business. My dad passed away, so that's why I kind of jumped in and ran that business, and it was in commercial linen. So the reality is, Josh, I didn't find my way to financial services till later in my career. Mm-hmm. And I really didn't even know what financial services was. I did that thing that everybody suggested that you do, is you go around to 5 of your closest friends and you say, can you see me in financial services? And by the way, what's financial services? And so I had a bunch of people, and I went to school in Indiana, and I leaned into my friends there, and they all said, yeah, you'd be great at it. And what's interesting is the guy that I sold our family business to, when we sold that business, he said, what are you going to do next? And I said, well, I don't know. But I probably next asked the smartest question I ever asked. I said, why do you ask? He said, well, you'd be great in financial services. I said, well, I don't get that. I don't understand why you're saying that. He goes, Marko, you walked into a family company. Yes, it's been in your family for 40 some years. But you understood tax, and you understood estate issues and insurance issues and profitability and management. And he goes, that's not normal just to walk into that. And then you package it up and you sold it. And you did that all on your own, with a lot of help with some really good advisors and people committed. But I'm going back a little far on you there, but that's really what got me motivated to get into financial services. I wanted to help small businesses. My family ran a small business for a long time, and I wanted to help small business. So when I got into it, I really didn't know where to start. So I got into a company that, like a lot of people do, it was a general agency. It was a broker dealer. They had an RIA a couple years later, and you just kind of started doing. And I wrote my first retirement plan probably about 2004-05 timeframe, and I realized quickly that's what I want to do. I want to really invest in small business. And we kind of did that for a few years. I partnered internally in that company with my business partner and co-founder at Two West, Ryan Rink. And we kind of just went about our business, and we started gathering clients and trying to do it the right way. Right about the 2008 timeframe, and I know we're going to unpack a little ode to Fielding Miller here in a minute with Cap Trust, so I don't want to take that away from the conversation. But we then decided at that point we wanted to go really hardcore, deep niche into retirement plan consulting, and that was our vision. So we launched 2 West in 2010. We were an RIA only, bound by a fiduciary responsibility to do what's in the best interest of our clients, and we just started going and talking to clients, and we really did not do much wealth management, not much private client, very little, if any. And we did that for 10, 11, 12, and just kind of, try to get a new business off the ground.
Right.
About 15, 16, that's when you and I met, actually. It's about when you and I met. We started doing the dimensional study groups, and we were being asked by Dimensional, and I'm sure you were too, to be a speaker at their conferences because they were trying to awaken their community of advisors to retirement plan consulting, because the majority of their advisors were boutique advisors on the wealth front. So we went down, and I'll never forget it. I was up on stage with my business partner, Rank, and we had added a third business partner, Vern Cushionberry, our chief investment officer. And we're up on stage, and I'm in front of basically the executive team at Dimensional. I mean, you're talking Nobel Prize winners, PhDs, David Booth, David Butler, the core of Dimensional, along with their 80 regional directors. And they're all looking at me, and I'm up there telling them about retirement plans. Right. And it was daunting in so many ways. And after that was over, we were asked by David Butler. He came down, shook my hand, said, "Thanks for coming down." And he looked at me and he goes, "Are you guys at TAMP?" I remember looking at him going, "I don't even know what a TAMP is. What do you mean by that?" He goes, "Well, you guys are doing some really cool things at 2 West. Have you ever thought about using and packaging those things up where another advisor could tap into it?" That was the genesis of GoalPath Solutions. And so that's how I got there. We spent the last couple of years really investing in the GoalPath Solutions side of the house, but everything is originated, for the most part, at 2 West, which is our local RIA in Kansas City.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll in just a minute talk about fielding, because as you said, we both have really kind of cool Fielding Miller stories, which I think created kind of the blueprint for Greenspring Advisors back when I was still there, and I think for 2 West as well. You mentioned you guys are based in Kansas City, and you and I were talking before we started recording, and there are so many. There was a big, obviously, announcement this week in the industry, acquisition merger, kind of spun as more of a merger, but creative planning with Peter Malik as CEO there, who's built like $100 billion just powerhouse private wealth RIA. Had done a little bit of 401k, kind of dipped their toe in the water, but that they just announced that they're going to be buying Lockton's 401k practice, and so really creates a powerhouse. I think they're probably the one firm now that I think most closely aligns with or competitively with Cap Trust, with these really kind of massive scale retirement and wealth practices. But there's a ton of amazing firms in Kansas City. It seems to be like a hotbed for RIAs. Why do you think that is? And how competitive is it in Kansas City? Because there's a ton of really awesome RIAs in Kansas City, Missouri.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about that, and here's the result of that. The great thing about having a lot of really good firms that are forward thinking and, in my opinion, doing it the right way as best we can, and we all have our spin on that. Clients win in this town, because even though that I'm competing against some of my friends and competitors and things like that, at the end of the day, we're all telling a really good story. We're just telling it our way. And so I've always looked at it and said, if you were a plan sponsor, a company in Kansas City, you got a really high chance of winning, because you're going to get a good advisor. And that's not to knock any other city, because every city's got good advisors, but you're right, there's a concentration here.
Yeah.
And Peter, I could tell stories about Peter just the same as I could tell about Fielding. I love that man. I love Peter.
Right.
The
guy's amazing. Like what he built at Creative, like they started Creative. He bought Creative I think his background was I think he was like an estate planning attorney, or he did something along those lines, and he wound up buying Creative, launched it around the same time that Pat Collins and I launched Greenspring Advisors, and he, needless to say, kind of left us in the dust with and he had some genius strategies. So,
well, we all have some regrets, and I'll give you a little bit of a regret, kind of. But what I mean by that is that when go back to 2005, and I wrote I won a piece of business. It was a good plan. I think it was my largest plan at the time. It was a good sized plan, a few $1 million, $7 million, I don't know. And I was so thrilled. It was my biggest plan at the time. And I get a phone call, and I answer it. He says, "Who's this?" He goes, "It's Peter Mallouk."
Mallouk. Okay, so I probably should pronounce his name the right way.
Yeah, that's all right. He didn't. I'm sure he's okay.
He's not listening to this.
No, he's not listening to me. And maybe he's listening to you. He's not listening to me. So he says, he goes, do you know why I'm calling you? I said, "Oh, I know exactly why you call me, Peter." I said, you're that estate planning guy. You want me to make referrals to you for wills and trusts?" And he goes, "No." He goes, "I've never lost before." I'm like, "Excuse me? What do you mean you never lost before? I don't even know what that means." He goes, "I was on the other side of that. I was the advisor that didn't win the business." And he goes, "Anybody that's going to beat me, I want to meet." I went, "That's flattering. I have no idea what I'm doing here." I was just getting started. And we go out to lunch. And here's what Peter's gifted at, among many, many other things. Peter moves quickly, and he makes really quick, good decisions. And I'm not patting myself on the back here, but Peter offered me a job within 30 minutes of sitting with him. And, obviously I said no, because I didn't even know what I was saying.
You're like, I just beat this guy. Like, what do I need? Like, I don't know him. Kick his butt.
No, it was more ignorance than that, Josh. Don't give me too much credit. I wasn't that confident. It was more that I was just getting started.
Yeah.
Why would I jump ship? I was just getting going. And, who knew that he was going to be, if you add the locked-in assets, a $230 billion RIA. I didn't know that. And you know what? There's probably 20 people, maybe 50 people in this town that have that story with Peter.
Yeah.
And but I love that man. I think he's doing it the right way. I wish him all the success in the world. And yeah. But to answer your question on why Kansas City, I don't know. Maybe it's because of all those little tentacles that started way back when. That we were all most of the firms in this town are focused on the RIA model.
Right.
And maybe that's it. Maybe that was it. Maybe it was the independence and the RIA model that was pervasive in this town, that was kind of promoting a fiduciary best practice. Maybe that was it, because I can't really find the individual. There's no grandfather of the retirement plan consulting in Kansas City. I can't find that individual.
Yeah. So now, this will be the third episode of the Fiduciary You podcast that is also video. So I'm holding up. There's this awesome book by a guy named Matt Ridley called How Innovation Works and Why It Flourishes in Freedom. I would tell anybody in our industry should read this book. I'm going to put this actually in the show notes. But it's really, he writes about the history of innovation throughout, the eons. And he talks about different pockets of innovation. So, the Ming Dynasty or Renaissance Italy. Talks about the printing press, Gutenberg in Germany, and
deep on me here, Josh.
Well, it's really fascinating, but he talks about Silicon Valley, right? So there are these times throughout history where we've seen massive leap forward in terms of innovation and how that kind of impacts society. And his premise is that it really needs, if you look, innovation historically has thrived in countries or city states or places where there's freedom, right? But what was interesting was he said that part of how innovation, he calls it we have and we're going on a tangent here, but I'll bring it back
Keep going.
in a second. But he talks about how we tend to grasp onto this idea of a great man or great woman in history, but that that actually isn't how innovation has worked. That the way innovation has worked is you've had pockets of people in historically, pre-internet in the same location that have had, call it, collaboration and co-opetition, right? And that he talks about the great man or great woman of history. They're really the one who kind of puts what he calls the last brick in the arch. That it's really about people and companies who kind of come together. They compete with one another, but they share ideas. And you've got the heads of these companies who interact with one another socially and professionally. And it's that co-opetition that allows innovation to thrive and flourish. And I bring that up because what I kind of heard you say there is, it's just unique. You can't really figure it out, but you had these really, really good firms that all probably started around the same time, pretty similar mindset. And as you said, I would imagine having a lot of really good firms there to learn from one another, to compete with one another, to collaborate, to idea share. It's kind of a rising tide that raises all ships, but there's just something unique. Like nobody would have thought in Kansas City, Missouri, there would have been kind of this hotbed of really successful large RIAs, but you guys all kind of started around the same time, and it's just
let's be honest, John.
That makes sense.
I think you're spot on there. I never really thought of it that way, because at the end of the day, if we were going to compete and win, and we've had our fair share of wins and we've had our fair share of losses. I mean, we're $3 billion in assets and continuing to grow. So we had some success. There's no doubt about it. But the reality is a lot of that was shaped and influenced by when we lost. Because when we lose, we want to know, well, what's going on? Why did they go in that direction?
Yep.
And if it wasn't just a relationship, sometimes it's just relationships, and we understand that. But sometimes it's somebody that was packaging up something a little bit different.
Right.
And so we were all influenced by it. That's a great point. Maybe I think you hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
By Kansas City. Yeah.
And I think you've seen that just in the retirement industry in general over the past, I'd say 5 or 10 years, this kind of rise of the specialist, right? And so one of the things that kind of in this book as well, kind of what the internet does is it kind of decentralizes, like throughout history, there was no way to communicate. Like part of the reason that innovators all kind of came together in the same basic location was because there was no way to share ideas, best practices. There's no way to kind of foster that co-opetition, if you will, in a distributed fashion. Obviously, the internet does that. I think that's the rise of specialists in the industry. Is we're a pretty small, tight-knit community, but there's a very kind of collegial approach that I think we all have. We realize a ton of business that's out there. It's not you don't need to win every single deal, though you'd like to build a really successful firm and a really successful business. And there's a lot of collaboration amongst specialists that helps us all get better. And ultimately, when we all get better, to your point earlier about people in Kansas City win probably a lot more than in other cities because there are so many good firms competing against one another. When we all get better in the industry, that means we get to impact a huge swath of people. And that goes back actually to the Cap Trust. And we'll start talking a little bit about GoalPath. But, I had my own origin story with Fielding back in 2009. We were pretty small at Greenspring at the time. I think we only maybe had 5 or 6 people. And we got on, his radar and Rick Shaw's radar. And Fielding was up in Baltimore one day, and he and I went out to lunch. And the way Fielding is with that charming Southern drawl that he has, he went, why don't y'all come down to Raleigh and come see us? We'd love to host you. And so, my co-founder Pat Collins and I, we went down to Raleigh, I think in 2010, 2011, something like that. And they spent a day and a half with us. We sat in a conference room. They did a big dog and pony show. They were trying to acquire us. But they were incredibly generous, and Fielding and Rick and that whole team, what I really respected was, you could see back then, they had the blueprint of building a powerhouse, and they had gotten to scale, but they were incredibly generous. They didn't hold back. I mean, they showed us they opened the kimono and showed us behind the scenes a lot of the things that they did. And I will say, and I'll always be grateful to Fielding and to Rick, because that actually gave Pat and I kind of the vision for Greenspring. And we tried to model a lot of the things we did over the years that I think led to a lot of success we had.
Yeah.
We really tried to model what CapTrust was, albeit on a smaller scale.
Totally.
Fielding is a kind of a giant in the industry, and I've always
we were all influenced. We
Yeah.
were all influenced by. I should say all. You and I for sure. And our story. I don't know that I ever heard the detail of that story to that level. And we had an identical experience. We read an article. Rink brought me an article in 2008. We kind of unpacked it together, and we're like, "That's what we want." Who's this Fielding guy? We didn't even know who Fielding was. And I don't know how big Cap was back then. And so we connected with him at a conference, and he did the same thing. We're up in his suite drinking some Bud Lights at the end of the day, and hanging out and just being real, right? I mean, I
don't think Fielding drinks Bud Light anymore, man. I think with how big CapTrust is right now, I think I think he's more of a craft beer guy.
Yeah, he might be. But my point is, my business partner bought Bud Light or drank Bud Light. My point is, Fielding stocked his fridge, so Fielding didn't miss anything.
Yeah,
he didn't miss anything, and he invested in people, and that's been his gift. And I'll give you a couple stories. So after that, he invited us down. Same thing, come on down to Raleigh, play some golf. We never got out the golf because it was just too busy. But we did fly down, and I'll never forget. I said, Fielding, I will come down there. I said, under one condition: I am not for sale. We want to build this. Prior to us, launching to West, we were trying to gather the facts and how does all this work. And I said, please invest your wisdom in me, but I am not gonna, put on the CapTrust hat. I'm not gonna do it, and it's not time yet, right? I got some things I want to do.
Yep.
And he swore, no, I promise, and he was true to his word. And I tell you what, and I want to share a couple of them because these are, Fielding-isms, and these couple little nuggets that shaped our firm, and we wrote them down. My business partner and I literally on the plane ride home wrote these things down because we thought they were great. And one, he told us to stay independent. He said, stay a fiduciary, stay under that RA model. And so we were not headed in that direction in the beginning. So we were like, okay, Fielding said so we're going to do it. At this point, we weren't questioning. We were just doing what the guy said. And then he said a couple other things, and I wrote these things down. One, don't build someone else's lake house. And I was like, okay, that's really deep. What do you mean? He said, listen, you guys are going to have success. I was like, I don't know how you know that, but okay. He said, make sure in this industry, you're going to have partners, right? You want to have partners, whether it be record keepers, custodians, and TPAs, and fund companies, and consultants, and peers. And he goes, work collaboratively, work together. Don't just open your door and start representing some product or solution that makes you guys a lot of money or makes the other company a lot. Don't build their lake house. Work collaboratively together. Make sure you guys are focused on the same mission. And that is easier said than done.
Sure.
There's a lot of people knocking on our door trying to get in the door because we obviously have influence on some clients' assets. The one that I'm going to point at right here, which is mind your Coke crates. And again, I'm sitting there going, what does this even mean? Mind your Coke crates. And what Fielding said, and you can't, I have no clue how to zoom in my camera, but what that picture behind me, and it's a caricature that my mom's second husband drew after telling a little bit about the story. It's Rink over there balancing Coke crates. And I'm old enough to remember this. Josh, you might be, I don't know. But I remember back in the day working in my...
so much younger than you.
You are so much younger than me.
Probably.
You are so much younger than me. But I was mowing grass for my grandma, and, the reward, she did pay us, but the reward was she would give us an ice cold bottle of Coke, right? And every time you got done with that bottle of Coke, you put it back in a Coke crate because there was a wooden Coke crate that somebody came and picked up, or she took it back to the local grocery, whatever it was. And I'll never forget that. And so what he was saying is mind your Coke crates, because every time you agree to take on a client that's going to fill a Coke crate. And your Coke crates are your time. And so make sure you take on the right type of clients. And it wasn't about size. It never was about size. It was about the mission. Is your client aligned with your mission, and vice versa? Are you aligned with their mission?
Right.
So we were very selective about who we brought on. And it was mind your Coke crate. So Rink was our magnet. He was out there trying to talk to the plan sponsors, and I'm wearing a business suit up there because I was the one making it all come together.
Right.
And that's why we were such a great partnership. So
yeah,
I like fielding is. Oh, wait a minute. One last thing about fielding. So I get back home to Kansas City. My phone rings at like 6 a.m. I look down, fielding mode. And it was in July, because I remember I'm in my, not my go to work attire at 6 a.m. and I'm sitting on my front step at 6 a.m. It's sweltering hot, and I'm talking to Fielding Miller, and he goes, I told you that I wasn't going to recruit you, but I've been thinking. I've been thinking. Right. I think you'd fit just fine here in Cap Trust. And I said, Fielding, let's keep the conversation going. But I've got a mission I'm on, and I want to see that out. But let's keep the conversation going. So I've always had a ton of respect for Fielding and Rick and their whole crew down there.
Yeah, I exactly the same way, and just they've I think there's a lot of talk going on right now in the industry, right? M&A and acquisition, and these large aggregators, and there was an article that Fred Barstein wrote earlier this week and posted on LinkedIn. He wrote it for Investment News, but it was about the speaking of Peter Mallouk and creative and acquiring Locked In, and just about that. And I posted on LinkedIn, and I think Fred, I generally speaking, really agreed with what his perspective on that acquisition. But, I don't agree that there is a lot of the talk in the industry, and it kind of turns into this industry can be very much like an echo chamber. But this idea that the only future for everyone is you're going to have to be part of a large aggregator, that the large aggregators, they're getting scale, they're going to win, they're going to, they've got all this money backing them up, and that, it's kind of this Orwellian, there's only going to be a handful of winners, and then everybody else is going to basically be working for the winners. And I just fundamentally totally disagree with that mindset, because I think the advice industry is always going to be fragmented, because at the end of the day, it comes down to, it's still very much, you have to execute. I hate when we talk about, it's all about relationships and trust. It is, but you still have to execute. But it is a very much, it's trust-based. And I don't buy the fact that, and I have a ton of respect for, Cap Trust, and then what Vince Morris is doing over at One Digital, and what Peter's doing at Creative, and you've got, Hub, and you've got these aggregators. But I am not of the opinion that number one, not every client's going to want to work with a big firm. I think there's a lot of still kind of, mistrust and lack of belief that bigger is necessarily better. Like a lot of times what happens is when you get bigger, you just, you're less nimble, and you're less kind of.
I mean, Josh, you hit it, the nail on the head's right there. I mean, you don't even have to go past that.
Yeah.
Meaning that yes, we can go on and on about that when you aggregate opportunities and clients and assets and of course you can quote unquote deliver some really refined solutions and services. But it's a capitalistic society. The bigger the company gets, the slower they get. Period. And you can go down how many different stories of this. They can't pivot. They can't move. And so innovation will never stop.
Yep.
So while the aggregators in today's, if you think about it this way, up until, I'll use the story we've just been talking about, up until maybe a couple of years ago, there was only one really big aggregator.
Yeah.
Called Cap Trust.
Well, Cap Trust.
And now all of a sudden, there's a lot of people heading in that direction because they were nimble and they were quick. And I'm not saying that they've taken advantage of anything Cap Trust wasn't doing. That's not my point. But they were bringing solutions and products and services and missions to the marketplace and they're growing quickly. Well, eventually, their model is going to become stale too. Everybody's does. That's the evolution of business. Period.
Right.
So,
and I actually think that leads into kind of like where I want to take and start talking about GoalPath, because I think what you built is kind of unique. When I started 20 years ago at Morgan Stanley, there were 10 plus wirehouse firms, if you will. I think there's 3 or 4 now, right? You've got Merrill, you've got Morgan Stanley, you've got UBS, maybe you got somebody else that's in there. But through M&A and through consolidation, and the reality is, that's happened over the past 15 or 20 years. They don't dominate the advice industry. If anything, the RIA industry, if you just look at like growth of channel, has dominated over the past 15 to 20 years. And so you really had a lot of the wirehouse folks were just, if they went to another firm, they were just kind of switching seats and business cards. But you've had this huge growth of the fiduciary advice industry. And so I am of the opinion that there's always going to be fragmentation. You will always, if you can find, you only need to have, if you can get as an advisor 25 to 50 good 401k plans, or you can get 50 to, let's say, 75 or 100 private clients, you can build an incredible business. And I actually think over the next 5 to 10 years, on this post, I said, I kind of quoted Mark Twain where he said, rumors of my death are greatly exaggerated. Like, I think rumors of the death of independent RIAs and retirement plan advisors is greatly exaggerated. In fact, I think there's going to be tremendous, I think the aggregators are going to be successful. They're going to win, but I think it's also going to create opportunity, to your point, for independent RIAs. And I think there's tremendous upside for those that remain to be independent, be a little bit smaller, be more nimble and responsive to potential client issues and innovation. And one of the things when I think about GoalPath and what you've built, from that, when Dave Butler was like, hey, if you ever think about building kind of a TAMP, which got the wheels turning for you to say, hey, we've built a good firm. Could we take kind of the infrastructure, the ideas, the resources we've created that helped Two West win? And is there a way that we can kind of package that up and deliver that as an infrastructure for other advisors that don't want to try to build it themselves and that they can leverage? And I think that was really the genesis of GoalPath. And so I actually see you guys, what you're doing as an enabler for those, especially maybe those independent firms who say, you know what, the private equity path, the acquisition path, the aggregator path isn't for us. We still have some work to do, because what you said, when Fielding doesn't know this, but it was a funny little thing. We were walking through security in Raleigh, Durham to get on the airplane. And we had just a tremendous experience then at Cap Trust, but we felt like there was more work to do. And as we were going through security, I said to Pat, I'm like, I don't know, man, what do you think? I was like, I'm having a lot of fun. What about you? Like, you think we should think about, folding in? And he had a great quote that became a rallying cry for us. And it was meant with the utmost respect. But he goes, right now, I don't want to be Cap Trust, but I really want to beat Cap Trust. And that was kind of the rallying cry for us that really kind of shaped us, again, with the utmost respect. But I think for the firms that want to remain independent, like, to do that effectively, you're going to have to offer more services, obviously. You're going to have to leverage technology well. You're going to have to have the right partners, right? And collaborate. Talk a little bit about GoalPath, because I think what you are building is a solution, a platform, a company who, enables advisors and independent firms to do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we've never had this conversation about that word, and the reality is, I classify us as an aggregator because that's how the industry thinks of people that are helping other firms, and it's the only way I get invited to conferences, right? I've yet to hear the enabler conference pop up. So, yes, we are more of an enabler than we are an aggregator, because we don't have an M&A model. And what we're trying to do is be really good stewards of the industry and really good architects.
Right.
And if we build it at basically Two West, and our clients are benefiting from it, then how do we package that up into something else? And another advisor says, well, I don't have the experience, maybe I don't have the resources, and a lot of times they don't have the time, right? They just, I mean, it takes time to prove these things out and build them. So we started rolling out some basics that were all, in our opinion, after the mission of driving better outcomes. And I know that's an overused statement, better outcomes, better outcomes, better outcomes. But what does that really mean? What does a better outcome mean? And how were you influenced, and how did you shape what you developed to deliver that better outcome? And, a lot of our solutions, we tried to be very low cost. That's a driver behind us. We didn't, we weren't doing it to be profitable. We were doing it to be able to run a company, even though we need to be profitable to continue to grow and provide jobs and grow the mission, but not overly profitable, if that makes any sense, right? You got some firms out there, and no names certainly, but, you can get me off on that tangent a little bit too, because our industry is wrought with folks that are, quite frankly, making too much money for the work that they're doing. And that's not right. And if you act in the fiduciary capacity, it levels that playing field a little bit. And I learned that a long time ago when I was watching my brother-in-law, who is inside an RIA that is one of the, I think, the longest standing RIA. 1966 it was founded. And he's one of the most brilliant people I've ever been around. But he made a good income, don't get me wrong. But it was, I was watching good salespeople in the same industry making 5 times what he was making. And this is before I really got going in the industry. And I was sitting there going, something's not right here. And so that was the fiduciary model, right? If you do things the right way for the right reason, yes, you can be profitable, but it takes longer, because you have to do it the right way. But back to GoalPath. You get me going here, Josh. I can go on tangents on you.
I love it.
But what we wanted to build, something that another advisor could pull off the shelf and make their practice better, could maybe make their practice more profitable, and ultimately drive better outcomes for the participants and employees that they served. And those took shape in the form of 338 services. That we were partnering. In some cases, that's just a custom bolt-on. In some cases, that was partnering with record keepers and building package solutions that were really low cost, delivering the right message. We're on the front end now. We've been doing managed accounts inside the world of TIA for a long time, and we're kind of taking that model of driving income, because we think that is the mission as well. That we can spend maybe the last 15 minutes or so just talking about income. But the reality is we've been doing it for a long time, and we're trying to figure out how to deliver that income message, that income solution to the individual. That's going to probably be in the form of managed accounts. We've got some really cool things we're developing there. We've launched collective funds that are taking advantage of all the things that a collective fund can add value back to both the plan sponsor and the individual, packaging those up for use by other advisors. And then the thing that really kind of jumped off the page that we didn't really see coming was financial wellness. And what I mean by that is that financial wellness is a topic that so many people, you have a whole podcast on it. And I borrowed these words from you, and you said, if you ask 10 different people what financial wellness was, you get 10 different answers.
Right.
And it's so true. What we looked at financial wellness as, how do you help an individual understand their entire situation, whatever the delivery mechanism is, so that they can not just get set up their retirement plan better, but set up their life better from a financial perspective. And we have a very unique opportunity as the advisor community to be front center, in that conversation, helping those individuals. What we realized is that it's not just technology, and so many people associated financial wellness with a widget, with an app, with a link, and the uptake of that was very minimal. The engagement.
Because you were licensed, I think, if I remember, I don't want to give away all your secret sauce, but you had partnered maybe with Questis.
We did.
Questis. From a tech provider. Component.
And I don't want to. Take anything away from Questis, because they're doing some great work out there. But the engagement when you rolled out tech only was very small, and it wasn't enough to make an impact. So we did what we called a fulfillment. I don't literally love the word, but it resonates with people. We added the personal touch. We put the CFP, we put a live person on the other end of the call that an individual can connect with when they need help, and a person that's bound by a fiduciary standard to do what's in the best interest. We did workshops and webinars and newsletters and targeted communication when we felt that somebody needed to hear a message, and we dripped on them, and we kind of put the campaign behind it. And in all of the cases that we've rolled out, or at least on the average, we've in most cases 5x'd the engagement, and that's the key. So we were taking technology. We didn't.
And how would you define engagement? I see a lot of times we see it on kind of the record keepers, like you be in a meeting, and not to knock on the record keepers, but you get they show kind of their wellness like statistics and whatnot. We had all this engagement. Well, what is engagement? Well, someone opened the email. Yeah, I'm not really sure that is engagement in the sense of like, are people taking the next best step? Opening an email isn't the same thing as kind of making progress on what's the next best, planning step I need to follow. Yeah. So how would you define engagement?
Yeah,
the financial wellness?
A few different ways. That's one. I mean, one thing is did they even pay attention to something, right? I mean, our email open rate's over 50%, which is off the charts, right? So that's great.
So awareness, basically, in some way. Awareness. Yeah. Okay.
We coined the term, or at least we used the term internally, called the power of one. And here's what we meant by that, is that when a plan sponsor or another advisor I'm trying to help says, well, what's the engagement? What's the utilization? Yeah. Everybody goes to how many coaching sessions did you hold?
Right.
As the defining, is the program working? And I said, that's just one component. Okay. Let's talk about the power of one. What if one individual in a company of 300-400 people, what if one took some time to get their financial house in order and they turned their life around, right? And I don't mean to get kind of sentimental or deep on it, but that is massive. It's massive for the individual. And it's also massive to the employee. I mean, the statistics.
Yeah.
Somebody that works past their kind of forecasted retirement age can cost a company as much as $50,000 extra a year in inflated salaries, healthcare costs, things like that. So, and I think it's going to lead really nicely into our income conversation, because everybody benefits if somebody earns the right to retire somewhere in about their mid-60s. That's a really, really good thing. And beforehand, even good on you. But if we can help one person, then the financial wellness program was worth it. Now, most companies don't look at it that way. They want to help the masses. But I look at it and say, sometimes we may only help just one, and it was worth it.
Yeah.
So engagement is more. It's about the emails. It's about the D's. I call them the D's. The D's are going to hit all of us at some point in life. And the D's are things like disability, death, divorce, disaster, dysfunction, right? Go down the list of the D's. And what do you have at your fingertips that if you're a modest income earner that doesn't have a lot of investable assets outside the 401k, where can you go to get really good, sound, best interest advice and education on what to do next? Where do you go? Because the advisory firms are run for profit, and most of the really, really good firms have really high minimums.
Don't want to talk to those people. Don't want to talk, or don't have don't want to talk, because I think they don't have a service model, an engagement model that essentially matches the scope of services that population, which is most, I always call it probably 97% of American workers don't fall in the target market of the traditional really good RIA.
Yep. So so to that point, we had to develop a model that helped the masses, regardless, something that was profitable, so we could continue doing it and grow it and hiring our bank of CFPs. And one of the ways we did that is we gave a parking spot for people that with small accounts, right? If you have a small account and you're retiring and that's your life savings, smaller account, their account, meaning, smaller to the industry, a huge account to them because it's their entire retirement.
Right.
And they need a $300 a paycheck to show up in their bank account once a month. That's incredibly important. That 80,000 walks out on the street and they're fed to the sharks.
Right.
More than likely they're going to end up in some locked up
equity indexed annuity.
And those things are coming around too. And I think when we get to income, we're going to talk about that. But we just thought it would be a good place for people to have a parking spot. And if that's their only spot for the rest of their life, and they're bound by surrounded by a fiduciary, that's a good place to be. And the people that needed advanced planning, we connected back to the advisors that were connected.
And I think that's that's kind of the unique thing with your model is you were essentially allowing these advisory firms that your partners, right, to elevate and deliver wellness through you. And, you would be kind of the tip of the spear, what I would call kind of like, would be like family physician, general practitioner. Hey, let's help diagnose, for the employees in, Mrs. Advisor, the employees in your plan will be kind of like the general practitioner.
Yeah.
We will diagnose. If these are basic needs that don't need a specialist like you, we'll help them kind of point in time. If they're kind of the smaller where there's no way they could kind of fit your target market and your minimums, we've got this fiduciary solution that we can offer. But as the general practitioner, if we diagnose that they have, advanced symptoms, if you will, we're going to refer them back to you because you're really the expert in the equation that can deliver that. And that's not what you guys are trying to deliver, but you're really trying to kind of like create a bridge back. Is that a fair way to describe it?
Did you just come up with that? I'm going to borrow that. That's really good.
I did come up with that right on the fly right there.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's good. No, you're spot on. We want to be on the front end, helping the masses, and it meets our mission, right? Our mission was never to drive better outcomes for some. It was to drive better outcomes for all.
Right.
And that was what that's why I was attracted to the retirement plan at the beginning. I could get up in front of a room and talk to 50 people at once. It wasn't just one-on-one. And don't get me wrong, you can only do so much in front of 50 at once.
Sure.
But I loved being able to influence the masses. Yes.
Yeah. It's leverage, right? It's what because I was the same way. I mean, we started Greenspring, we were all private wealth, and I love that. And high net worth people need good advice too. But what really was attractive to me was I thought we gave good advice, and this idea, of leverage. Archimedes said that if you give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to stand, I can move the world, right? And so, if you give really good advice to a committee of 3 or 5 people that are representing the interests of 100 or 200 people, well, now you get massive leverage. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about, the 50. Now, it's not the same thing as, what you would do with a private client, kind of high net worth, really involved. But in many cases, they may not need, that same scope of services from, to that extent. So, And again, going back, like your mission of really trying to be a partner to advisors, not a competitor, not a threat, but really kind of a partner. And at the end of the day, architect of, let's make sure that everybody has, access to the resources they need. I think, a lot of advisors listen to this podcast. And one of the things I would say, based on what I think the wisdom of Marko, is that don't sell wellness around utilization, because the reality is, if you look at the statistics, utilization is low. And if you're selling utilization, you're going to be misaligned with your clients. I think, and the way we did it at Greenspring, and kind of, I used to hammer into everybody, is like, we're not selling utilization, we're selling access. Because when somebody needs our support,
right,
it's utilized 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Right? So that's really, but it's about providing, access and awareness. You can't force people to engage until they're ready to engage, but you need to be able to provide the access and drive the awareness that, hey, if you have a need, here's where you can go to for it.
And that's you can only deliver that service and scale to make it work, meaning to make it profitable enough to be able to hire the right people. Because and most advisory firms can't do that. I mean, they're if you're going to take on something and you're a 2 to 10 person shop, that thing has to deliver pretty quick on a return on investment. It's not like these. I mean, we've got.
You don't have a war chest, basically, that you can.
I mean, we've got a lot of money. I don't know what the number is, but it's pretty high of how much money we've invested in this labor pool and this solution. And that's not what most firms can do. And don't get me wrong. I mean, we also have a model that an advisor can't partner with us, like full on come underneath our RA. But that's not what that's not the mission we're really pushing. But some advisors get to that point where they're like, I'm out of this compliance game. I don't want to run my compliance. I don't want to run my legal. I just want to go find clients, take care of clients. And I said, okay, well, we got that model too. So,
right. So talk a little bit about, so right. You talked about these, I think when your first step, with GoalPath, and back when we met in 2015, 2016, we were in a study group. I think we were in Chicago. We're sitting at dinner. It's like the first time that you and I had met. And you guys built basically collectives, using DFA funds as kind of an underlying. DFA had a really brilliant strategy back in the day called Managed DC, right? And they were trying to essentially deliver managed accounts to participants, but really more with, I would call it like an asset liability driven approach. The problem is, I think they underestimated distribution. One, in terms of like, do we have the right advisor channel? We have amazing private wealth RIAs, but they don't do a whole lot in the 401k side. And the other, I don't think they anticipated how hard getting on record keeping platforms would be. And so in concept, Managed DC was actually a really amazing solution. And they pivoted after a few years and realized that it was tough sledding, and they moved to their target retirement income funds, which was really about, I think, protecting income at retirement. But you had built some collectives. Using their research and I think as maybe a starting point, and also maybe some of their kind of glide path research, some of their funds, but you kind of built on top of some of the foundation they did. That was your first step, but you've gotten into managed accounts as well. And I think you mentioned TI Cref, but there's some cool stuff you're doing around there. And then this move into not just a managed account, but how do you kind of move that from accumulation to decumulation from an income perspective? So maybe talk a little bit about your thinking around that, some of the things that you guys have been doing, because I think it's really, really interesting.
Yeah, and I do too, and I'm fascinated by the whole concept, and we've been on this journey for now 11 years, and I do need to give some credit, or all the credit really, back to the founder at Dimensional, David Booth, because I was sitting in a booth with David 11 years ago, and he was telling me about the work of Dr. Robert Merton. And I run around country and say that Dr. Merton's the father of income in so many ways, or the grandfather of income. I don't know if he would appreciate that, but at least I say that. But he and he was talking about, David at the time was talking about that our industry's got it wrong, right? And I'm not saying any story that hasn't been prior said 20 times on your podcast, Josh, but it's the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. It's not Wealth Accumulation Act, So we need to be developing income. David and team recognize that. And where they, and I think it's fair to say, because Managed DC didn't work from an execution standpoint, because I'll quote the Myron Scholes, which is a huge influencer of Dimensional, an idea without execution is a hallucination. Because if you can't make it come to life, then it's going to die on the draft table floor. And that's a little bit what happened with Managed DC, because Dr. Merton was trying to create a DB plan, a custom DB plan for every single individual. And he had it right. I mean, there's no doubt about it, but it was before its time.
Right.
And so what we did is it was working in Europe, if you look at it, because they didn't have the 401k system. They still have a lot of state systems, overseas. We have a system that basically transferred all the liability to the individual, right? So here we are, and there's a cool graph, and you've seen it, where DB plans go like this and DC plans go like that. And all that means is the liability was transferred to the individual to figure it out. Well, when you did that, you remove the ability to make institutional decisions that influence income across masses of individuals. And you took away income from those individuals, because the system wasn't built to drive income. The system was built to drive wealth accumulation. So they recognized that. They wanted to put everybody in this DB. Well, what it really was, what Managed DC was a managed account. It really needed to be a managed account, because it needed to have that fiduciary in the middle to, in essence, hear what the participant needed, hear what the participant's journey was, and then say, I'm going to deliver a guaranteed paycheck for you. Okay, but we're going to agree on how it's going to work. But all we were doing is reinventing a guaranteed income product, but for the individual, off the liability of the corporate books.
Yeah.
And so we started doing that.
And through a mutual fund vehicle instead of
that was the problem. Right. How are you going to do that in the system that existed in the United States? It was almost impossible. So what we did in the beginning, and you were talking about these collective funds, what we did in the beginning is they said, what if we put guardrails on it? Because bluntly, Dr. Merton was trying to take a guy like you, Josh, that has had some success in your career, you're well funded when it comes to retirement, and he would say to you, well, just because you're in your 40s doesn't mean you shouldn't take your allocation all the way down to maybe 10% equity. You probably should. Why? Because your funded status is really high.
Right.
Josh, why do you continue to take risk when you've met your objective of your income needed to retire, with dignity? That story does not work in the system that we built in the United States.
Yeah.
And so imagine coming into somebody going, a 45-year-old saying, hey, I've taken your asset allocation down to 10% equity, and 90% is in guaranteed solutions and products. Then the individual would be like, excuse me? My advisor told me I was supposed to be 80-20.
Right.
And so that is the shift that's happening. And what our collectives did is they were 3 glide paths. So we put guardrails on it where we couldn't go all the way down to maybe 10% equity. If somebody's funded status was really, really high, we could go down to maybe, if they were 45, maybe, I don't know what the number is, maybe 40 or 50% at the bottom. But we also had a collectives that we built them in tranches. So a 20-40 aggressive, 20-40 moderate, 20-40 conservative.
It was kind of like with Prudential, before they sold with their Goalmaker platform.
Yeah.
But doing it in a CIT environment.
And we didn't do it exclusively.
Similar overlaying risk, with those 3 glide paths over top of time horizon.
Yeah. The piece that we still didn't get right in the collective, because we can't, and this is why we're excited about managed accounts, there was no filter on the front end of a collective inside a retirement plan to determine funded status. Okay? Because that's important.
Yeah.
That's the holy grail.
If you don't know funded status, how can you choose the right asset allocation?
Correct. So we did what we could, and we created triple glide path target date funds that were built in CITs that were not exclusive with dimensional. We do have some dimensional backed collectives. We have others that have all a best in class of mutual funds inside there, and ETFs and all the things that compile those. One's index based, one's enhanced index. We've had great success with those because I think they speak to the community of plan sponsors and participants really well. But they still miss the point because they don't have a filter on the front end on funded status. So what the managed account is going to offer, and I can't wait for this. This is is this my last big thing, my last big hurrah, as I'm getting the gray hair and the gray beard, I only got so many more days to keep influence in this industry, but or doing my best part of it. But I think we're here. I think this next chapter is going to be massive, and it's all going to be about getting the individual participant understanding and simply delivering income so that they can retire and know what they have for retirement and live off that money. Mm. And, it's a compliment to Social Security, but, somebody that's got 150,000 life savings, handing it to them at retirement and saying, now go figure it out, that is wrong. That's so wrong. I don't even know what to say about it. Somebody says, wow, I'm going to go on a vacation. I'm going to go buy a new home. I'm going to go buy an RV, whatever they're going to do with it. And they keep depleting that life's work. And now, granted, the participant may come back and say, well, but that's my money. I should be able to do anything I want with it. And I say, well, it is. You've got that 100% correct. But if you would have been building that entire time toward a monthly income that you were trying to figure out so that you didn't put your financial life in jeopardy and make it harder on yourself than you needed to, we'd all be a little bit better off.
Right.
And so I think the challenge today is that managed accounts are the way to bring in the data, right? That's how we bring in the data of the individual. That's how we can help determine funded status. But the problem with managed accounts today is they're too expensive. They're way too expensive. And managed accounts for the last 20 years have been a way to determine an asset allocation for somebody. Asset allocation is table stakes anymore. It's 10 to 20.
Managed accounts historically they've been, in my opinion, kind of like glorified target date funds.
Yeah.
At a much higher cost.
Yes. Yes, but if we can turn them into,
but I think that is starting to change.
I think it is, and there's just like anything. And again, no reason to name names, but when you're in a managed account and you're paying 50 to 80 basis points for asset allocation, and that's before fund expense.
Right.
Excuse me?
Just for an investment solution.
Just for an investment solution. So now we're going to be able to deliver with the Secure Act passing and guaranteed products coming in. Now we got to figure out how to get managed accounts. Somebody said the other day, and it might have been even you, Josh, I don't remember who said this to me. They said that the pivotal cost of a managed account, when it can overtake target date funds, will be when we get the all-in cost of a managed account down to 25 basis points.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's too far off.
Yeah.
Because you've got a lot of target date funds in the 30s and 40s still today for active solutions for sure that are great target date funds.
Right.
But if we can deliver that same cost structure and put the filter on front, put guaranteed income in there, now we've got something. And that's where our industry is headed. And I think if I had to say, if somebody put me on stage and said, Marko, what's this industry going to look like in 10 years? I said, well, I think history is going to repeat itself. The target date fund solved a problem, put people on an automatic, de-escalation towards their, taking away equity over time, de-escalating their risk over time, made a ton of sense. Gathers now 75% of flow is into target date funds. If we can do the same thing with a managed account solution and bring the cost down, I think you're going to see the same thing happen in the managed account world, where you're going to see the majority of assets flowing through that filter and customizing and generating guaranteed income for the individual. So that's that's our mission that we're on at GoalPath, and we're trying to help the industry and understand what tools, resources, partners that we can partner with and try to get that story into the hands of as many advisors as we can.
Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily need to be kind of a binary either or. I mean, you may have that more of this dynamic, and I know I think Empower's try to do some things around here as well, but maybe it starts off for the first, to kind of go back to the managed DC, right? Maybe you have for the first 20 years of somebody's career, 15 years, they're in a super low cost index fund, right? Or CIT. And then maybe based on whether it's a funding status level or whether it's an age level or whatever that looks like at 40 or 45, maybe there's then a transition into more of a managed account, more of a dynamic. I wrote about it in the fiduciary formula, which I kind of described this dynamic that at some point you start in a target date fund and then you move into a
Yeah.
managed account at some point based on some thresholds or triggers that are set up.
Yeah, you got it.
Right.
And I think that's where we're headed. And I think some companies that are doing some really good work in the space. There's a lot of companies doing a lot of good work, but I think iJoin's got it figured out from a low cost. They're bringing a very low.
iJoin's more of like a middleware platform, right? In a lot of ways, are they more of a tech platform that enables the ability to develop managed accounts and deploy them?
Well, there's and it's not my story to tell, right? They would tell their story better than I would, but basically what they're doing is they're enabling record keepers to bring managed accounts to a participant at one basis point.
Mm.
That's a good start. Now the record keeper is going to have some cost to that, and maybe the advisor is going to have some cost to that to deliver that. But that's a really good start. One basis point to deliver the system, right? That intake system where you're bringing in data from the individual, processing that data, and then developing a custom solution for that individual based on funded status. That's critical to keep that cost really low. Well, iJoin's figured that out. Now they've got some competitors that are a much higher cost than that. And they've got a system that's been built for 10, 15 years around that cost system. And that's what, that's the innovation. That goes back to how we started this conversation.
Yeah.
The big guys are doing it the way they've been doing it for a long time, but I think they're going to get challenged in their delivery. And then you've got this middleware industry that's popping up that is taking companies like Allianz that figured out a liquid portable annuity. That's a really cool thing. Just put those two words in front of annuity and you probably already won. Liquid and portable. They've figured out these things. Now you got to get that middleware to take that data, smash it up, so the record keeper doesn't have to spend millions of dollars on how to figure out how to report it to the individual. So this middleware is doing that, and they're working in concert with the insurance companies to do it. So that's why I think it's a fascinating time.
Yeah.
Secure Act wants everybody to have access to a guaranteed annuity. I think the American retirement system overall would be better for it if a lot of people were retiring with guaranteed income. But how to build the system at a low cost to deliver it, that's our current mission. And amongst other things, that's one thing we spend a lot of time thinking about at GoalPath.
Yeah. No, I love it. And I think you guys are, I think you guys have built really, really cool stuff and very forward thinking. And this idea of, there's and I might have said it in another podcast, but, and it's even kind of it's kind of my mantra. One of the things that we've been good friends for a long time. You've actually been a really good sounding board for me since I left kind of Greenspring earlier in 2021 and kind of walked with me along that. But, I think we both, have this kind of idea of like, how do we support and help advisors succeed, right? And kind of the analogy, going back, and I remember when I was a kid in the 80s, and Dan Marino from the Dolphins, he had a sponsorship, if you will, with Isotoner, the gloves. And he would buy the commercials. He'd buy isotoners for all his linemen, and he would say,
"Dating ourselves, but keep going."
Right, protect the hands that protect you, right? And so, in a lot of ways, I think what you're trying to do with GoalPath, the things that I'm trying to do with Fiduciary Works, is really be, how do we kind of help protect the hands that protect the American worker? And I think you guys are doing really, really cool, innovative stuff. So, as we wrap up. One of the things I like to ask guests is, because the whole purpose of this podcast is to help make ERISA fiduciaries smarter. What would be your best piece of advice for an ERISA fiduciary, whether that's a committee member, or whether that's an advisor, or whether that's, people within the industry that play an important role and support the mission of fiduciaries? What would be your best piece of advice?
Oh gosh, you didn't prep me for this one, Josh.
Throw you a curveball.
Yeah, best piece of advice. Well, part of it is you got to be patient, and also have an open mind. I think for everything that we just talked about for the last 20 minutes, this is going to challenge the thinking.
Yeah.
A lot of people that are kind of inside the world of ERISA, as you might want to say, and it's going to challenge the way we've been speaking our consulting message and speaking our message to individuals. since the advent of the 401k. And so be patient, be open-minded, because, let's be honest, the word annuity has not had a very good connotation in our industry for a long time. But that has nothing to do with the word annuity. That has everything to do with the way the annuities were distributed to the end user, the individual. Yeah. Annuity is a great word. Guaranteed income is a wonderful thing. If we can get the cost down to it, then we've done the right thing. And if we can make it portable and liquid, even better. So that would be my biggest advice: is be patient. Don't have to jump the next best thing, right? Because it's going to come in waves, and it's going to the iterations are going to be developed. But you still have to be open-minded. You can't just shoot it down because of maybe some past experiences, or maybe what we believe to be the truth of the past, because this is the right road, in my opinion, to be on. Right. And but it's gonna really challenge the thinking and the profitability and the revenue models for a lot of folks out there. And you're going to get pushback, right? You're going to get a lot of people.
Yeah, if you start to kill the golden goose, you're going to get people who are going to, who are going to want to push back.
That's right.
Yeah,
you got it.
I think that's good. I think that's good advice. Well, this has been really enjoyable, Marko. Love always chatting with you. And where can people stay or get connected with you, learn more about GoalPath and the things that you guys are doing there? What's the best way for people? And I'll put this all in the show notes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Heck, they can call me. As far as that goes, just call my direct line.
You still have a phone?
Well, you know what? Our IT guy did get rid of our desk phones. It all goes to my cell phone. So okay. I must just give my cell phone, but I'm not going to give my cell phone.
Okay.
They can call me 913-641-4134 or 643-4135. But the reality is, you can email me, Marko@GoalPathSolutions.com. You can go to GoalPathSolutions.com and hit info@GoalPathSolutions. Get a hold of us. Obviously, we're starting to get our name out there.
Yeah.
We just need advisors to connect to us. And we got the LinkedIn thing going, and we got all that. We just hired a new marketing firm. We're trying to get our social presence out there better. But I open my calendar up to just anyone that wants to talk, any advisor that has something they want to unpack with me. Kind of what we were talking about before we went on live, Josh. Same way you were doing. I'm trying to maybe be that. I'll never probably to the extent that the Fieldings and the Peters were to me 20 years ago when I was getting rolling and thinking about what I was doing. Those were big mentors to me, and I'd like to return the favor even on whatever capacity I can. So I've always had an open door policy. My scheduling link, I always say, is available to you. Jump on my calendar. Let's talk.
Yep. Great. And I'll put all that so people can,
I appreciate
find you on LinkedIn, find GoalPath. All that stuff will be in the show notes. So
I appreciate it.
Well, my friend, this has been a blast. I hope you've had a good time. I think we covered a lot of ground and had some really interesting conversations, and love what you're doing, and wish you continued success out in the marketplace. And I think you guys are absolutely on the right path. Well,
appreciate you giving the opportunity to share it. You don't get to tell your story very often, really.
Yeah.
I've always said, if you got an entrepreneur, if you want them to get talking, just ask them about themselves.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's an interesting, actually. So we will wrap up in just a second, but you bring up something I think that's good, and I think this goes to the heart of the work that we do for people. Is that everybody has a story.
Yeah.
But the world we live in, most people don't want to hear other people's stories, and it's not there's not a great mechanism for them to tell it. And I think you honor somebody when you let them tell their story, and I think that's the heart of even how we counsel individuals. Everybody has a story about their life, about their money, and that in my opinion, the most elite advisors out there are the ones who can sit in front of somebody, give them a forum to tell their story, and then help figure out a way to kind of connect the dots and bring kind of that story, all their, all their baggage they bring, but all their hopes, kind of their dreams, bring that to life. And so, I love the fact that you've kind of shared your story with the Fiduciary You podcast audience. And I appreciate that.
I appreciate it, man. You're doing great work out there. Keep it going. Your guests, I don't think I stack up to a lot of the guests you've had on there, but I appreciate giving the opportunity to tell our story for sure. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Have a good Thanksgiving.
All right. You too. Happy Thanksgiving.